Welcome to the American Security Council Protecting Our Freedoms podcast. The mission of the American Security Council is to educate and engage American citizens on national security matters, economic security matters, and the need for moral leadership in the United States of America. Please enjoy the podcast.
Welcome. I am your host, Joy Votrobek, here at the American Security Council Foundation. And today's podcast, we welcome back Dr. Karen Hiltz.
Thank you.
Karen will be joining us the first Tuesday of every month for a new series titled Education in Crisis. The series is intended to bring attention to what is currently being taught in the curriculum in public schools, as well as what's on the table to be adopted into the current curriculum, such as critical race theory, equity versus equality, and much more. This series also intends to help inspire you to get engaged and make your voice heard about public school curriculum. And before I introduce Karen again, please consider supporting the ASCF so we can continue these podcasts and programs that protect your freedoms. You can go to www.ascf.us. We accept all major credit cards, PayPal, and even cryptocurrency. You can find this podcast series on our website, as well as Karen's latest article under ASCF position papers. Karen has authored the book, The Case for Choice, One Size Fits All, an Outdated Model for the 21st Century. She also publishes the Apple Report, Diary of a Public School Board Member. You can find this on her Facebook page under the Apple Report. Karen, it's nice to have you back, and I'm excited for this new series. On the previous podcast that we did probably months ago, I think it was now, you gave us a little of your background, well, a lot of your background, so if you don't mind giving us a little more of how you got involved with education.
Okay. Well, first off, let me start out by saying I served in the U.S. Navy.
Thank you for your service.
Many years ago, but I did serve in the Navy, and that was probably the most rewarding thing that I've done because service is always important. But what got me into education was I had a career in business after the Navy, and then I decided that when I finished my business career, I would just go ahead and teach at the college level because I thought that would be kind of fun and interesting and stuff, so that's what I did. And I taught business courses at the undergraduate and graduate level and was like, oh my goodness, I'm not sure how prepared students are to go out into the business world. And I'm talking from a writing perspective, from a communication perspective, and from an interaction and personal skills perspective. And so that's what kind of catapulted me into running for school board. I sat on a private Christian school board and then also ran for public school board in Virginia. And the rest is history. Here we are.
Here we are. Thank you very much. Thank you for your service. And as I mentioned, we'll be discussing different critical race theory, equity versus equality, and different words. But let's start with critical race theory. It's very popular now. I'm glad we're starting the podcast as we are because it's becoming much more known to people. So if you could expand on what critical race theory is and why it's an issue.
Okay, critical race theory stems back for several decades, and actually the tenets of it come from Marxism and this class against class, pitting class against class. Well, when it came to the United States, that doesn't work so well because we do have lower, middle, and higher class incomes, which categorize us based on economics. And so they had to find something to pit groups against each other, and so race is what they chose. So that's why it's called critical race theory, not just critical theory. Critical theory continues to be a topic in law school. So a lot of students getting their JDs will focus on critical theory and stuff. But it's become more dominant in K-12 as a tool to propagate Marxism from the perspective that a house divided can't stand, I'll say, okay? And so if we can pit one group against another, then that causes friction and division, and that's a problem for society and for families and our education system as a whole. And it's interesting because critical race theory is done in more of a what I'll call a covert manner, because you won't find in curriculum the words critical race theory. You will find in curriculum, especially in K-12, you'll see things like social and emotional learning. There's topics and sections in curriculum that talk about how to deal with social and emotional learning of children. You'll see culturally responsive teaching, and that focuses on cultures and the different types of boxes that the public education system wants to place all of us in and stuff. And so it's not necessarily in your face per se. It's done in a more soft tone, covert perspective, in that they use nice words, but the words are used for nefarious purposes in order to divide and disrupt. So,
which explains why I was listening to a discussion the other day that it seems like this critical race theory, or CRT, is being just sprung on us, but it's not. It's like you had mentioned, it's been around for a long time, but they're using other words to kind of keep it softer.
Yes.
There is also, interestingly enough, legislation being considered in Congress currently indicating that critical race theory is actually illegal according to Title VI of the Civil Rights Law of 1964. To paraphrase what it states, it just basically prohibits discrimination under federally assisted programs on the grounds of race, color, or national origin. Karen, what are your thoughts on critical race theory and the Civil Rights Law of 1964?
Well, these programs, these theories, and when I say critical race theory, I also want to point to, the 1619 Project and the teachings of some of the socialists that have dominated the world of academia. And so therefore, because they are focusing on the color of your skin, that is discrimination. There are some people out there who say that critical race theory is reverse discrimination, because the Civil Rights Act of 1964 was to help those who were black and brown. Now there's discrimination against white, and so this is in essence reverse discrimination, because white people are being portrayed as the oppressor, and people of color are being portrayed as the oppressed. And this is not the reality of it. Another word that we've talked about before, Joy, many times, and had conversations on this, is equity. Equity sounds very good, okay? Investors and homeowners love equity. They love to have equity built up in their house, and they love that their investments have equity in them and stuff. So that's a good thing. So now equity within the public education system is not about equal opportunity. Now remember, equity does not mean equality. Equity means redistribution of resources or reallocation of resources, however you want to refer to it. But that's what they talk about with regards to equity. And the example that is often out there and talked about is, children. And you may have seen the picture that goes along with this, but you've got 3 children and they're trying to look over a fence, presumably a ball field, but they're trying to look over a fence, and one of the children is tall, one of them's mid-size, and one of them's short. And so in order for all 3 of them to be able to see over the fence, then the short one is given resources to elevate them. The middle one is given resources to help elevate, but the tall child is left without any resources because he's already tall and he can already see over the fence. Well, that is allocation of resources based on because he's tall, because they're short, because they're medium size, and that's not how it's supposed to be. It's supposed to be equality of opportunity, not equity of outcomes. We should not expect all children to be equal with regards to outcomes, because we all have our own skills, our own knowledge, our own interests, and our own talents and gifts from God.
So you jumped in and answered my second,
Sorry.
well, my third probably question, which is, no, that's fine. That's good that we understand the difference between equity and equality. And there's other words that are being used, as you already had mentioned, that critical race theory is also known as, also can be seen in material as culturally responsive teaching. Is there other words that we should also be looking for?
Well, I think a big one is the social and emotional learning. Now, I have a problem with that. It all sounds good. Teachers, it's great that teachers are attuned to the social and emotional behaviors of students and stuff. I don't, necessarily disagree with that in total, but from my perspective, the parents are the ones who should be accountable and responsible for the social and emotional welfare of their child. If your child is acting out, then they need to be disciplined. If your child is disruptive in the classroom, then the teacher needs to take that child out of the classroom, not try to find a tool or an intervention to quiet the child down, because it takes away from the learning of the other children. And so, dealing with social and emotional, again, is a parental responsibility, and it is very costly for the public education system to be dealing with that. And what I mean by that is that not only do public education systems hire teachers and principals and administrators, but they hire nurses, they hire psychologists, they hire sociologists, I guess, and they hire resource officers, which are policing groups, policing entities, and this, to me, is way outside the bounds of what children should be doing in school. They should be learning reading, writing, and arithmetic. And the school system shouldn't have to deal with all these other issues. Now, the reality is that you are going to have children who act out, okay? Because there are some parents who, who teach their children differently than I would teach my children, let's say. And so, so there is a need to have some type of supports to deal with some of these issues and stuff. However, my philosophy is let's partner with those entities that are within the school, the county, the school district, whatever. For example, if you have health issues, don't hire nurses. Don't have the public school system hire nurses. Go into some kind of memorandum of understanding or partnership and collaborate with your local health department, because not only are you doing something that's outside of your responsibility as an educator, but you're also competing for those resources. Like if you have nurses or health professionals over at the Department of Health, and you want to hire some for the school system, then you're competing for those resources, and we shouldn't be in competition with our other public service elements. So
that's an interesting concept where you're going with that. And the same, would you say, for the social worker or the counselor?
That's right. What is it? Social services, I think it's called. Yeah. For children who have family problems or foster care and things of that nature and stuff. Work with your social services department and let them. Now, when I served on the school board, we did have a memorandum of understanding with the police department, so we didn't necessarily hire them away from the police department. The police department did hire the police officers, and then we entered into a memorandum of understanding, and we did allocate resources to support those people who did spend time in the schools and provided that policing opportunity. So in that respect, we did collaborate, but in the other elements, we don't necessarily collaborate.
And then you also mentioned the security officer, and I think we hear a lot about it lately, at least in this district here, of it's an equity officer, they want to call it?
Well, from a security officer perspective, my mind goes to the school resource officer, the policing entity. what they're doing, they started this in academia decades ago, having equity and diversity officers, directors, positions, okay? Now, in Indian River County, earlier this year, they put out a job description looking for an equity and inclusion officer, I think it was. And so there was a lot of pushback from the community, from the public on that, and so they did away with that job description. However, they just came out with a reorganization, and lo and behold, there is someone who's there is a position for equity, dealing with equity programs. So even though it didn't go away, it appeared to go away, but that's where parents need to be diligent, and the community needs to be diligent with regards to, okay, if they're going to take it away over here, is it going to be filtered in somewhere over here? And how are they going to repackage it or rename it in order to get their agenda or what they want to accomplish accomplished?
And their agenda, speaking of which, the equity officer, would that be trying to incorporate some of this curriculum or wording into the curriculum that we're talking about?
Yes, because they will be focusing on programs that deal with this whole concept of critical race theory, and they talk about it as if they're trying to close the education gap. Because in testing, in state testing, there is a gap between, and they categorize people, again, they're putting us all in boxes. You've got the white kids, the black kids, the Asian kids, the Hispanic kids, the children with disabilities, and then, of course, you've got male and female in all of those categories. And so they're already collecting data and slicing and dicing it. And because there is a gap between white and black, they think that doing some of these programs by redistributing or reallocating resources, it's going to help the grades, the test scores of the black children elevate. Well, I'm here to tell you that it's not all about testing. You need to consider the learning environment that these children are in. You need to consider the curriculum that they're being taught. You need to consider the tools and the methods that you are providing for them to be able to learn the materials that they need to learn. And when you're focused on color and gender and political persuasion and getting all of these social components into the curriculum, you're not teaching them reading, writing, and arithmetic. So to me, that's the bigger picture.
It also seems to be probably taking away from the teacher's ability to teach those subjects and not be interrupted by all the politics that's going on.
Yes, very much so.
And I would, going back to your other subject of, farming out the health and the social services, that would also help the teachers be able to focus on their job instead of other issues going on with their students and not being disruptive in the classroom.
Disruption, behavior problems are becoming more and more. When I was serving on the public school board, there were students who would act out, and I'm talking elementary school even. I'm not just talking about middle school or high school. I'm talking about elementary school. There were children who would be disruptive, and not only were they not learning and trying to manipulate the teacher, I'll say, they were being disruptive for all the other children as well. So a disruptive child in a classroom isn't only harming themselves, they're harming the whole environment. And when you are told as a teacher to deal with it in the classroom, it's very difficult to do that. My perspective is you remove the child from the classroom. And if you have to have, another room in the school where these disruptive children can be sent for the day. I mean, not just for the class period, but for the day, and work with them on, just informing them this is not appropriate behavior. I mean, we've got to, I don't mean to sound like a mean person, but children have got to be educated in that there are social norms, there are social behaviors that are expected within our society. At least they were when I was a child. Right. And I think it still holds true today. And you cannot expect children to just automatically understand what social norms and social graces are and stuff. So they have to be taught.
Going back to your other point, too, it really should be coming from the home.
Yes.
And the parents.
Yes.
Now, that's not always going to happen, as we know.
That's true.
Maybe they don't have time. Maybe they don't, haven't been introduced to those kind of norms from their own life. So the idea of taking the child out and putting him in a different classroom, I think would be good as far as not disrupting the whole class just because this child's acting out. And I have heard from numerous teachers that sometimes it does feel like they're babysitting. So it's taking away from them being able to teach effectively.
Yes. And I do feel bad for teachers a lot of times because I think we do have an element of very dedicated and committed teachers. And because of government intervention, government oversight, their hands are being tied to a degree as well. And I think this is very sad because the children are not learning what they need to learn with some of these mandates that are out there.
Right.
So
it's definitely good for the parents to be very not only aware of what's being taught, but also to help at home to get them socially adjusted. How would you reiterate how important it is that parents are aware of the curriculum being taught to their children? And how do they get involved, I guess?
Well, it's extremely important that parents oversee the books that their students are reading, to look at the assignments. Are they getting assignments that they are supposed to go out and participate in a protest, a pro-abortion protest, or a keep God out of school protest or something like that. That's not what, I don't have a problem with people protesting, but it's not, I don't think it's appropriate for the school system to pick the protest for a student to go out there or to even have an assignment like that. That's not the role, again, that's not the role of the education system. That is a parental responsibility. There again, we all live under some kind of foundation, morals, ethics, something that drives us to the positions that we have and take in society and stuff. And being disruptive and anti-America, anti-patriotism, anti-our Constitution, that is not appropriate in my mind. And there are some schools out there that are teaching that. So parents, be vigilant, pay attention to the curriculum, pay attention to the assignments, pay attention to the extracurricular activities that your children are being involved in, and communicate with the teachers on a regular basis. If your school district allows you to come in and visit the classroom, by all means, take a half an hour or an hour every week or couple of weeks or something, and go sit in the classroom and see what your children are being taught.
And that's probably been hard this last year with COVID. But
yes.
Hopefully this coming fall we'll see some changes. And when we say curriculum, I understand that it's not just civics and history, but they're also incorporating this in math.
To me, these types of theories are permeated throughout all subjects.
Okay.
Yes, I think a lot of it started out, and the presumption was that it is civics and history related because of the 1619 Project and the race issue and slavery. They talk about, all that and everything. And so I think that is, and I love these man on the street stuff when these programs do man on the street and they go out and they ask, whoever who they randomly stop and say, who was the 45th president, or who was the first president, or who did we win the Revolutionary War from, and who fought in the Civil War, and people don't even know the answers to some of those questions. And that is a problem. We need to understand our history and stuff. And yes, we should understand the good, the bad, and the ugly, because life is not fair, and life is not always pretty. So, we have to be cognizant and aware of that. But you don't have to pit people against each other.
Right.
And how it will be permeated into other courses is, for example, a group of us here in Indian River have been looking at the English language arts curriculum for K-5. And there again, it's the social emotional learning, it's the culturally responsive teaching, it's the how do you decorate your classroom, does it represent your community, do you have posters and sayings and books and everything in your classroom that talk of, political action and LGBTQ and, socioeconomic. And kindergartners don't even know what socioeconomic is, So it's kind of like that's how. And then in math, which is coming up, the review for the state of Florida is coming up soon. And word problems. Word problems are an easy way to kind of lead students down a particular perspective or agenda or avenue or indoctrination. So anyway.
So parents need to be aware across all subjects of these words that we've been discussing to look for that in the curriculum. Mm-hmm. And how can parents get more involved? I mean, understand this is basically public school funding, correct?
Well, it's public school, and those elements that fall under public school. There are charter schools.
Charter schools, too.
That have come under fire. There are even private schools that have come. New York City had or up in New York State, I should say, had a private school where parents became outraged by this racism curriculum that was being propagated in their school and stuff. And, this was a school, I want to say, their tuition for their children was like, I don't know, $50,000, $60,000 a year. And why would you want to pay that kind of money to send your child to a school that taught them to hate anyone that didn't look like them because of why? That's a good question. So parents are rising up with regards to not just public school, but charter schools and private schools. I would say the only school choice option that parents have pretty much 99.9% over is homeschooling. They pick the curriculum, so a lot of homeschool parents are much more attuned to the curriculum that's being taught to their children. And then because the children are in the home being taught and they're participating in activities that the parents are working with their children with based on their interests and their talents and their skills. But yeah, I would highly be suspect of probably just about any school that you send your child to.
And so the parents need to get involved, would you say, as far as going to school board meetings or that and being involved with the teachers as well, going to the classroom?
I would say join your PTA, PTO, whatever, be involved in that. I would say visit your schools. I would say have conversations with not just the teachers, but the administrators. Be aware of what's coming down the pike. Attend the school board meetings. A lot of them are online now, so you can view them from your own home if you have that capability within your school district. Even consider running for school board. Just because you don't have a degree in education and you've not worked in the education environment doesn't mean that you're not a good school board member. I didn't work in the K-12 environment, and so I viewed things from a business perspective. And I think we need people with varying degrees of knowledge and experience on school boards. We don't need a school board that is dominated by people that come from within the system because that's all they know, or that's their predominant knowledge and experience, and so they tend to perpetuate the system rather than make positive change for the students. And remember, education is supposed to be about educating children. It's not supposed to be about indoctrination or agendas or politics or whatever other term you want to throw in there. But it's about educating children to become productive citizens and be able to have a job, so that they can provide for their families. So I'm on my rant.
No, thank you very much, because I think it's important for the parents to hear how they can get involved and where they should get involved and the words that they should be listening for. And as we discussed, this is not just being sprung on us now. It may seem that way, but it's been coming for quite a while under the guise of different wording.
Yes.
And to your subject, or to what you were speaking of before in homeschooling, my mom was a teacher, and she saw this coming 20, 30 years ago, some of this stuff, and had pulled me out and homeschooled for that particular reason. Now I have my own daughter in public school, so I am going to be looking for these wording and getting involved as much as possible. And I know it's hard for working moms to do that, so I like that some of these are recorded or they're live so we can watch the school board meetings. Mm-hmm. So I would encourage people to get involved, as I will encourage myself. Thank you very much for coming on the podcast today, for joining Protecting Our Freedoms and starting this new dialogue with me on education in crisis. Next month, we'll focus on organizations that support this curriculum that we're discussing today.
Mm-hmm. Okay.
And all of these podcasts can be found on our website at www.ascf.us. You can also find it on YouTube and Rumble by typing in American Security Council Foundation. Please subscribe to our channel, comment, and share our podcast with your family and friends. And if you would like to stay up to date on what the ASCF is doing, you can sign up to receive our monthly newsletter. Just go to our homepage at www.ascf.us. Thank you for joining us today, and we look forward to you joining us again next time as we talk more about protecting your freedoms.